Welcome to Forum 360, a global outlook with a local view. We are a nonprofit, grant and donation funded program that depends on volunteer moderators who present a wide variety of topics. You can follow us on radio, WONE FM 97.5 and WAKR AM 1590. We can be viewed on Hudson Cable TV, Hudson, Ohio, and on Western Reserve Public Media Fusion Channel 993 on Spectrum, and you can see us on YouTube. Today we're learning about the upcoming 2020 decennial census. I'm your host, Pat Simons. The U.S. Constitution directs the federal government to count everyone living in the United States, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. islands every 10 years. The 2020 census is the 23rd census taken since 1790. It takes at least 3 years of preparation and process to update and finalize the questionnaire and organize data collection. It is well underway for 2020. Why do we need a decennial census, and why is it important to participate? How do we participate? Our guest today is Jen Miller. She is the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters Ohio, and she will help us through understanding with factual information and updates about the decennial census. And we want to welcome you to the program, Jen.
Thank you, Pat. So glad to be here.
Well, let's start right off. Let's talk about why the League of Women Voters Ohio is involved in the census.
It's a great question. So the census is to count all people, and that data is used every 10 years to redistrict the state house, as well as to reapportion the congressional districts in Ohio.
Great. And I believe this is a National League effort.
Yep.
And League Ohio is part of that National League effort as well.
Yep, the U.S. League and the League of Women Voters of Ohio are very interested in the census, and as are our partners across the state and across the country.
What kind of qualities is the League looking for in the 2020 census?
It's really important that the census counts every person. Mm-hmm. That is what it is directed to do. So we want to make sure it's an accurate census. That's most important. And so that means we want to make sure that the implementation assures that people are participating, that we're making sure that those hard to reach folks, maybe they are elderly, young children are often undercounted, new immigrant populations. We need to make sure we count everyone. Not only is the census used for making legislative maps, it's also used for a wide range of program dollars. So almost 700 billion federal dollars that goes to the states is based on census data, and a lot of state dollars are also based on census data.
So the process they use, you'd want it to be transparent and very easily accessible for the public to participate. And there is a diversity in the communities that is also of interest on the census. What is the federal department that the U.S. Census Bureau falls under?
So it's actually under the Department of Commerce, and there are several regions around the country. The office that oversees the Ohio Census is based in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. What is the main job of the U.S. Census Bureau?
Again, it's to count all people, regardless of their nationality, their race, wherever they live, their age, to count all people.
And when you conduct the decennial census, what happens with that data? What does that apply to? You alluded to some broad categories, but what specifically would the individual see the effect?
Yeah, so they're going to get, you could fill it out online, you could fill out a paper questionnaire. If they can't reach you, they may send someone to your house or may give you a phone call. But they're going to ask questions like how old everyone is in the household. And actually, that's a really big one. And one of the number one populations that's undercounted, as I mentioned, are children under the age of 5. that's a big problem because that census data is how they plan school facility needs. And so we only do this count every 10 years. So if there's a 2 or 3-year-old in the house, that kiddo is not going to have another chance to be within the census count until he or she is 12 or 13 years old. So there's a lot of different questions, but it's designed to understand the population at large.
But the governmental impact is we have representation in the House of Representatives.
Right.
That is determined by that. Electoral college votes are also apportioned by population. I think I was impressed where you think about this as a federal funding thing, but it certainly has implications and has data that state and local can use too.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the law is that we have equal representation. So that means that we need to know the population well. And so that's why we count it every 10 years, so that we understand where the population is living, so that we can better make congressional district maps, state house maps, the electoral college, all of those different issues. Ohio could lose a congressional district, and so it's really in all of our interests to make sure that everyone counts.
Oh, that makes sense. It puts a little more of a pressure on participating so we get that done. I was looking at the ohio.gov website, and they will tell you specifically on there 10 ways a decennial census affects you. So there is a resource from the state, and I believe if you talk with county and local officials, they're going to tell you even more refined ways of how this data affects, and you said schools and that sort of thing. Now, the decennial census count is only one of the statistics that the Bureau gathers. They conduct other surveys over various years. What kinds of things would the public see if they went on the U.S. Bureau website?
So it's really fun, actually, just to get on the website. You might get an idea of what careers folks are fulfilling at this point. Just more richer data about the population. But yeah, when that happens, they're just doing samples,
right,
which is why everyone needs to participate in this process,
right,
because this is the only time we count the entire U.S. population in a 10-year cycle.
Right. So when you see a link on the census website that says American Fact Finder, they're not getting that data from the big decennial census. That's
right,
the in-between surveys. And that's actually a very fascinating thing to look at if you want to learn more about your own community. The Constitution only asks that all people be counted, but the Bureau website says that it is constitutional to ask additional questions beyond the basic population count. About a year ago, the Department of Commerce posed a question asking for citizenship status. And I was wondering if you could tell me what's going on with that. I understand there's a challenge in the courts and your take on that.
Great, thank you. So there are other questions that can get added. There is a question as to whether this is particularly constitutional to ask the citizenship question.
Okay.
And that is because that's data that can be received in other ways. So that's the first. The second is there's a real concern that people will be afraid to fill out the census, that there'll be some sort of backlash, and that it will be used to punish or target their family. Immigrant communities are saying even folks who are here legally are afraid to fill out the census at this point because of this question. And so if the point is once every 10 years we count the population, then there's a good argument to say this is an operational problem if the question is in there. And so the League, along with many states, cities, counties, other nonprofits, have all challenged this question. Okay. It has been heard in a court in New York, which has said that it should be removed. There are cases in Maryland and California that will likely move forward as well. The question is whether these courts rule the same way or not. If they rule the same way, then the question is likely to be removed. The Supreme Court's not likely to take it up. If any of the courts rule differently, then the Supreme Court will have to make a decision to kind of reconcile the various opinions in lower courts. So we'll have to see where that goes. We are running into a time constraint too, in that there's a lot of design of the questionnaires, printing of the questionnaires, distribution of the questionnaires, that all needs to happen in 2019, even though the counting is in 2020. So there's not a lot of time to really fight about this for too long.
And you think the U.S. Supreme Court will step in knowing that there's constraints and that would probably be an outcome if there's no agreement?
Yeah, I think the Supreme Court will only step in if there's a disagreement. And then they would need to have an expedited cycle on that.
Well, stay tuned, right?
Yeah.
So on January 24th, 2019, the Census put out a new study, and they looked at barriers, attitudes, and motivators toward participating in the upcoming 2020 census. They did cite 5 barriers: data privacy, some of these you've alluded to, fear of repercussions, distrust in government, feeling that it doesn't matter, and individuals can't see a personal benefit. And given the fact that accuracy is really important and that people respond, I'm hoping today that we're helping knock down some of these barriers when we're done. People are asked to respond. What might happen if you are delayed in your response and the Bureau needs your data? What would happen?
So they will be following up with households who do not respond by mail or online. So you may get a phone call and you can answer by phone, or you may actually get a personal visit.
Okay.
Which also brings up another point. They're now hiring their field staff. They're opening field offices across Ohio. They'll be looking for folks, especially multilingual folks, but many different kinds of individuals to either be making the phone calls, to be even walking neighborhoods and verifying that the streets actually have the street numbers actually have homes on them. Very easy stuff, just that's not even interacting with people at some point. So lots of jobs available, and so that would be something for folks to watch out for. They're good paying jobs, and it's a neat way to get to know your community better.
And you probably are the best person to be there because you know your community.
Yeah.
Is that something you'd probably go to the Census website and maybe find job opportunities?
Yep.
Oh, thank you for that. For those of you who've just tuned in, this is Forum 360, and I'm your host, Pat Simons. My guest today is Jen Miller. She is the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters Ohio, and we are discussing the 2020 decennial census. Jen, one of the barriers, of course, is confidentiality of information. What do you know about that, and what kind of guarantees would the public have?
Right. So there have been many, many cases in which the Commerce Department and the Census Bureau have refused to give data of individuals. So they're only allowed to give the data in macro form, which is really the full totals and the full, really analysis of population at whole. And so there have been many court cases, and they've won over and over again, decades, over the last many decades, that requires them to keep that confidential. And it stays confidential for 72 years. So we should be safe. But I understand, especially in these times, we're in times where people don't trust the government. And in some ways, I think that's, the government is there for us and takes care of us. But on the other hand, there's a lot of reasons to question the government. Even just the most recent shutdown, we're in tense times. And so the good news is that this agency has an entirely different process for confidentiality, and we should trust it.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging. I also understood when I looked on the website, they take it very, very seriously. And in terms of staff and breach of confidentiality, there are steps they take. I mean, they do jump right on it. So I was encouraged by seeing that. Do you have any idea when we'll start to see the questionnaire appear?
Yeah, so it's not this year. So this year, what our focus is on is settling these court cases. They're staffing their field offices, doing their hiring, getting the forms printed. The beginning of next year, you will be hearing from the Census office in a myriad of ways Very likely you might even see it on social media where you can click the link and get your household signed up. So the first quarter of the year is particularly key for getting as many folks as possible, but it will go for several more months just to make sure that those households who haven't responded, that they're followed up with.
So if you don't have an email, they're going to find you one way or the other. They're going to send it to you in
Right.
the mail, or they'll phone call, some way. So you don't have to worry that electronic communication is going to be the only way that this will be done.
Right.
But for those of us who use it, it's going to be very convenient.
Yes.
It sounds like the Bureau has moved more into electronic communication, and that's been phasing in probably mostly since 2010. So
Yeah.
it looks like it's going to play a bigger part this time around. Is that your impression?
Yep, that is my impression.
Now, I don't know if we're supposed to have bands and parades, but there's Census Day is April 1st in 2020.
Yep.
And I thought, I'm not sure if we're supposed to point out that that's also April Fool's Day. Probably not a good choice. But I was wondering, is that an awareness type of date that's letting everybody know? Hopefully you've been participating, and
Yeah.
if you haven't, please do. So that's our official.
Yep.
The whole country kind of jumps into April 1st. That's how I gathered it. Also, December 31st, 2020 is a significant date. Can you describe that?
That's when the macro data, the population-wide, again, not individual household data, but the macro data is actually due to the President of the United States.
Okay.
So when the Census the Census Bureau must deliver that to the President by that date.
Okay.
And then it is released to the states and the public at the end of March. And that is when the state of Ohio will begin its process of creating new legislative maps under the process that was approved in 2018 in May by 75% of Ohio voters for new congressional districts. And we also had a process in 2015 for new state house districts. That data will be used, and that process will start in April.
So in some ways, this is a banner year for Ohio. I mean, the redistricting process happens anyway, but now we have new ways of drawing districts. And now this data becomes even more relevant. And having our say and putting our responses in will help with that process. Now, I know that League has been very much a promoter of the two issues for the state and the U.S. Congress redistricting. Do you have any comments about how you might follow the data and how you will be watching the redrawing of the districts?
Right. So we will, first, right now, we are absolutely active in educating the public on the importance of the census, and we will be actively involved in the use of that census data and redrawing the map. So that will be done at the State House. Our headquarters is in Columbus for the State League, and we will be there every step of the way, looking at the maps that are proposed, testifying ourselves, potentially even running a map contest where
wow.
everyday Ohioans can submit their own ideas.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So when that data is released, the State House and they will get that, and the President will have it, but the public will also have access to that data.
Yes.
So that's a really nice thing to know as well. Now, there are groups called complete count committees. Can you describe what those are, and when is that occurring?
Yeah, so those are at the local level and the state level, and they're designed to really work with the Census Bureau staff to make sure that our populations are truly counted. And so you could have on a complete count committee League volunteers or community leaders or maybe pastors of diverse groups who might be undercounted, specialists in different languages. And it's all designed to get a broad perspective of community members about how to make sure we're reaching everyone and what are the best ways to do that. So we have not heard whether Ohio will have one or not. We are hoping Governor DeWine will have a complete count committee.
At the state level?
Yep, but there are a lot of local complete count committees.
Yes. that seems to be happening around the state. I know in Summit County, they announced last October, Summit County and the city of Akron went out and found a group of collaborators, cities, townships, so forth, and organizations. So they have made that effort. They've started that. And I assume that was happening all over the state.
It's in the interest of all of us to count everyone, and the complete count committees can be a valuable piece of that. So just a few other points. If a county or a locality wants to get Ohio EPA dollars to fix their drinking water systems, that's based on census data.
Oh, wow.
Money for low-income school lunches is based on census data. Transportation dollars, emergency response planning. Literally, our daily lives, every single one of us is impacted by census data and how that's used to allocate resources, to plan community development, even jobs. There are a lot of companies that use census data to decide where to locate.
Okay.
So it is in everyone's interest, which is why we hope that Ohio will have a complete count committee, and we hope that will be announced and organized soon, and that localities throughout the state will do that as well.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're making the case for why more and more we have a vested interest as individuals, and it is going to affect us.
Yeah.
Now, some of these complete count committee people are volunteers. Would some of the hired positions under Census Bureau be part of that, or is that pretty much local public officials and civic groups, more of a volunteer type thing?
So the complete count committees, the people who are on there typically are not paid. They may be paid by their organization to sit on that committee, but they would not be paid by the Census Bureau to be part of the complete count committee. So that's what I mean by the volunteering, in that organizations can, go to Summit County, for example, and say, I believe I have a different knowledge of the community and I would like to participate in the complete count committee, and potentially they would be asked to join. So that's separate. That's really about the high level. How are we conducting our outreach? How are we making sure that we're meeting the needs of very unique populations? So it could be things like maybe a county complete count committee would decide to let all of the kindergarten parents know that they need to count their children. So it could be things like that. So that is its own kind of more about design and working smart and locally and statewide to make sure we count folks. The paid positions are more about the implementation itself and the data collection itself.
And it sounds like the complete count committees are very personal. They're your neighbor type people. They're people who know you, know your community, and you're likely to recognize them, perhaps.
Yeah,
that would
a
be
lot of
in
them,
that
I would
regard. What kind of role is the League Ohio involved with the census? I mean, you know about it, and you've told us how it works and all, but what is League Ohio doing?
So the League of Women Voters of Ohio has sat down with Secretary State LaRose to talk about the importance of the census as the first step for redistricting. We are encouraging any state leaders who we come in contact with of the importance of the complete count committee at the state level. We are participating with our local leagues in forums across the state to talk about the importance. And we will do everything we can to be a partner in the census process.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, we're very appreciative. This is a lot of information to get through. We want to thank Jen Miller, Executive Director of League of Women Voters Ohio, for informing us about the decennial census with factual information and the importance of participation. We appreciate that the League of Women Voters, that you give your volunteer time and you are dedicated to educating the populations and our public so that we can all help promote good government. To learn more about the League of Women Voters, you can go to lwvohio.org. I want to get that proper. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much.
The Census Bureau website tells us the decennial census is a constitutional mandate. The founders took a tool of government and made it a tool that ensures empowerment of citizens over their government. The U.S. Supreme Court has described the census as the linchpin of the federal statistical system. It is constitutional to ask questions beyond a simple population count, but it requires a process that invites close scrutiny and transparency in determining the need. Your participation helps your community receive federal funding. It helps determine representation in the U.S. House of Representatives and the number of electoral college votes apportioned. And there are further ways that you are impacted personally at the state and local level with the data that they use this in their decision making. To become better informed about the U.S. Census Bureau and the decennial census, go to www.census.gov. If you are viewing this program, we will scroll more websites and links at the end. I encourage you to participate in the 2020 decennial census. This is Pat Simons for Forum 360. Thank you and for tuning in to us today. Have a great day. Goodbye now.
Forum 360 is brought to you by Electrical Impulse Communications, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, an anonymous donor, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.